Good morning, everyone. How is everyone doing this morning? Good, 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 good. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you all so much for turning out on a Saturday. It is really wonderful to see the community coming together to learn about important issues related to climate change and what's happening in our own communities, as well as opportunities to act ourselves. Thank you for welcoming me to Pasadena. It's really wonderful to be here, and I really appreciate being included. I was asked to talk today about extreme heat in our city and our region, and what we're doing about it. To the extent that you all are informed on climate change, and it seems like many of you, if not all of you, are really informed on what's going on in the world around us and the environmental challenges that we're facing. You understand that one of the most intense impacts that we're vulnerable to as a region is extreme heat. And it's a really important area from a health standpoint, from a community cohesion standpoint, from a natural ecosystem standpoint, to really be addressing, of course, climate change overall, but also the kind of real community level impacts of extreme heat. And so I wanted to just kind of step back for a minute and give you a little bit of an overview of what's going on in Los Angeles. And it's exciting that we also have my counterpart here in the county, Gary Giroux, who you'll hear from in a little bit as well, because we've really been working closely together to ensure that what's happening at the city level and the county level work together. And that's a really important partnership, because we have to continue to broaden our work beyond our own boundaries. We know that climate change is a global issue. And so when Mayor Garcetti came into office, one of the first things he wanted to do, he was very involved in environmental issues in the city council as well, was put together really the city's first ever sustainable city plan, looking at the world looking at what was sort of ahead of us. Let's see if this is working here. Should I point you? Let's see. There we go. So understanding what's ahead of us, looking at the city in the face of a significant amount of population growth that we are expecting. In the 2014 timeframe, we were in the middle of a historic drought, really of epic proportions, that was and continues to have really dire impacts across the state of California and certainly in our region. Looking at what does it mean to really take the environment out of its box and really focus on sustainability across all the issues, all the challenges and opportunities that are ahead of us. And so that was one of the things that the mayor really took to heart in what was his motivation for developing the Sustainable City Plan. Understanding that we have the ability to really harness the creativity, the imagination, the ambition, the smarts of this city, of this region, to put together a plan that is comprehensive, that is forward-looking, that is ambitious at the same time. And so a little bit about what is the Sustainable City Plan. It really provides our blueprint, our green print, our vision for a sustainable future, but does so in a way that provides kind of long-term outcomes and our long-term goals, but really also ensuring that we are setting ourselves up for near-term successes, that we're developing programs and projects that are going to have benefits, real tangible benefits for people today, not just in the long term. And so it really was about setting out that vision that would allow us, as I said, to take the environment out of its traditional, conventional box and knit it together with ensuring that the work that we're doing to keep our environment healthy also is offering a prosperous economy for communities across the city. And as part of that, really restoring equity, particularly to communities that have been most impacted by environmental issues over the history of our city, but also looking ahead at who's most vulnerable to climate change and really concentrating those benefits to those communities. So for the first time, really developing, thank you, really developing a program that is the environment, economy, and equity together. And that's really a frame for a sustainability plan that we hadn't seen before. We hadn't really seen other cities doing this, and now we've begun to really see that come together. And so, as I said, the plan provides really a vision for our future, those short-term results within sort of righting the ship toward that long-term vision. That gives us a framework to build out policies, but it also, in some ways, early on in the administration, provides a management tool, a very specific management tool that we use every single day in the city, that all of our departments sort of orient their work toward every single day. And that's a really exciting way to make a plan actionable. And it has been a vehicle for engaging communities, engaging our residents at the same time. So that's been a really important kind of key elements of how we've used the plan. On that point, though, just to give you a sense and really drive it home, the mayor, he uses this plan when he sits down with all the general managers of all of the city departments to assess their performance. It is against many things, but it is indeed against the Sustainable City Plan as well. And one of the things he did when we released the plan in 2015 was direct the key departments, dozens of departments across the city, to appoint chief sustainability officers, so that I essentially have kind of my diverse army of sustainability officers across the city, that it is not one department's job, it's not one person's job, it is actually everybody's job. It is in every department's portfolio to work on sustainability, and that was something very new and very different and has made all the difference, and I'll tell you some stories about that in a minute. So this is just a snapshot of what the plan looks like, how it's broken down into environment, economy, and equity. And if you look at everything across, I hope the glare isn't too bad, I hope you can see it, but if you look at everything across water and solar, clean energy issues, energy efficient buildings, but you look at mobility and transportation, housing, you look at air quality and urban ecosystems, I mean, we're touching every aspect of our lives, of our daily lives, of how we manage the city and ensuring that we're taking sustainability into account. And you can see an area that I'll focus on today is about preparedness and resilience. And that's a key aspect of when we think about where we're most vulnerable to climate change and how we become resilient and prepare ourselves in the face of climate impacts. So again, just quickly on the framework, for each of those areas, we've set out a vision, and then we've set out specific outcomes in that near and long term, and then we offer some strategies and specific initiatives that we're undertaking in order to reach those goals. And just as a sneak peek, or sneak preview, when the mayor released the plan in 2015, he said that every 4 years, we will update the plan because we recognize that goalposts move, that the science changes, that technology develops and innovates and changes, and that we have learnings in the work that we do, and we need to continue to iterate on all of our goals. So building on what's worked well, adjusting where things aren't working, accelerating where we know we can or need to accelerate. And that plan was released in April of 2015. If you think about where we are right now, we are 4 years later, right now. And so in just a few weeks, we will be releasing the full refresh of the Sustainable City Plan and really demonstrating how the mayor, since then, has increased our ambition every step along the way. When our president said that he would withdraw the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement, the first thing the mayor said on day one, on that very day, was that that would not happen in LA, that we would uphold the Paris Climate Agreement, and in fact, we would work with mayors across the country to show the world that America has not withdrawn from our commitments, and in fact, we are upholding our commitments. And so as part of that, we've been working with cities actually around the world to define what does it look like? What does it mean for a global megacity like Los Angeles, the second largest city in the country, to uphold the Paris Climate Agreement? And at a minimum, what that means is that we have to be carbon neutral by 2050. And the mayor committed to being carbon neutral by 2050. And so what this plan, in just a couple of weeks, will show are very concrete paths on how we get there. So that's not what we're here to talk about today, and I'd be happy to come back in the future to talk about that new plan, but just to put it out there that this is a really exciting moment for us, and we've been working very hard with communities across the city, with our partners at the county, with all of our city departments, with everyone around us to ensure that we're incorporating their feedback, their priorities into this plan. And so it's a labor of love. It's been a year in the making, and it's coming out in just a few weeks. So we're really excited about that. But back to the topic of the day: extreme heat and cooling our cities and our region, and understanding the strategies to do so, and how and where we need to deploy those strategies. So what we did in the 2015 plan was audacious, was ambitious, but showed that we were serious. And we looked at the issue of urban heat islands. Are folks familiar with urban heat islands? It's this issue around sort of the combination of the built environment and just how the city is situated, how neighborhoods are situated in the face of increasing extreme heat. How we create these pockets of hotter hotspots within the city, or whatever jurisdiction you're measuring, these hotspots within that jurisdiction that are caused by various factors, by the density of buildings, by the heat of our asphalt and ground cover that can absorb heat. If you think about in some parts of the region, the hottest part of the day could actually be as the sun is setting in the 4 or 5 o'clock time frame, because actually that's when the asphalt has had enough time to fully absorb all that hot sun all day and be re-radiating it back out to us on the ground. And that's an example of what an urban heat island is. And so we've been taking close care, and it's still something we have to continue to work through with scientific experts around the region and really around the country who are working on this issue, to understand what we need to do to lessen those hotspots. And so we set a goal. We set an actual temperature reduction goal that had never been done in the US, and the only place we'd ever seen it done is in Australia. And people said, people still say, can you do this? And we say, we think we can, but we have to put these goals out there because it orients us toward the policy ends that we're trying to achieve. It also brings partners to us, and I'll talk a little bit about that really exciting phenomenon that we've seen by putting out ambitious goals, by saying specific strategies that we're going to deploy. It brings communities along with us. It's helping push the market and technologies to innovate, to develop these solutions, and allow us to think creatively about how we get to our goals. And we've had partners who are here in the room, who are in the back tabling, who have been really key. Climate Resolve is here, who've been really key to helping us understand and develop out those strategies, those policies, such as focusing on cool roofs, which we heard a little bit about just now, on cool pavement, which I'll talk more about, and using our natural systems, using trees and green infrastructure to cool our neighborhoods as well. And that's where we've really focused. In addition to the Sustainable City Plan, since then, we've also reduced Resilient Los Angeles, the city's resilience strategy, which dovetails really closely with sustainability. I am the Chief Sustainability Officer. We also have a Chief Resilience Officer, whose job it is to look across a number of areas of vulnerability that we have in Los Angeles, certainly to man-made potential climate change-related impacts, as well as the natural systems and the natural environment in which we live, like our seismic threats and our ability to be prepared for a large earthquake, for example. And so Resilient Los Angeles really looks at disaster preparedness, economic security, climate adaptation, and infrastructure modernization, prioritizing our most vulnerable people, looking at our most vulnerable systems and infrastructure. But if you think about it, a lot of these things are really quite intertwined. And so the resilience strategy does take on those different elements. And then if you look at everything from fire or landslides, from climate change and pollution, urban heat island, extreme heat, inequity, homelessness, disparities in access, aging infrastructure vulnerabilities, there is so much of this that actually is very, very integrated. And so the solutions that we need to deploy are, by nature, also need to be interdisciplinary. And the partnerships that we need to undertake are very interdisciplinary. And so I've circled urban heat island and extreme heat to see that it sort of fits neatly in the climate adaptation box, but it's certainly not just that. It really has to do with all of our needs to address economic security, needs to address our infrastructure modernization. They all work hand in hand. And we're developing goals around urban heat that the resilience strategy helped us kind of develop more, and you'll see more coming out in the 2019 Sustainable City Plan as well, around developing an urban heat island vulnerability index to really understand the neighborhoods in the city and where we might be most vulnerable to extreme heat, to develop out some neighborhood pilots to test different strategies and the integration of those strategies. What's our best cooling cocktail between the different solutions or the different problems that you're trying to solve, and using the strategies that I talked about, which I'll get into more detail around cool roofs, cool pavements, and our green infrastructure, and what the good combination is of those different strategies. Just a reminder of why this is really important. When we look at projections for urban heat across the city, and this is just a cutout of the city of Los Angeles, we've had really wonderful opportunities to work with partners such as the Trust for Public Lands that has developed out a really fantastic tool called the Climate Smart Cities tool, which helps us understand different components, help us overlay different pieces of information over the city so that we can see where the most disadvantaged communities are, for example, listed there or denoted there in red, our most disadvantaged, vulnerable communities across the city. We can overlay things like, where is our tree canopy? And you can start to see by no surprise, there is certainly a lack of things like tree canopy in areas that are our most vulnerable, most disadvantaged communities, as defined by a really important program called the Cal Enviro Screen that was developed by the state of California. Really fantastic, yet already quite outdated 2012 study at UCLA of, at the neighborhood scale, what the projected increases in high heat days on an annual basis will be by mid-century from climate change. That's a 2012 scenario, and we know that the scenarios have gotten worse, have accelerated, and so we're looking forward to continuing to work with the academic and the science community to understand this information at a more granular level, at a more current pace. But this is what we knew we could base our information on back in 2014, for example. And it's no surprise, but it is very sobering, because a high heat day is 95 degrees or higher. That's hot. 90 degrees is high and hot. 85 is high and hot. But if you're talking about 95 degrees or higher, that's a set of vulnerabilities and a set of stressors on a community that some communities, may not be able to cope with if we don't really think now about how to lessen the impact of that level of climate change in our neighborhoods. Also, no surprise that there is a connection between hospitalizations and mortality in high heat events. And so we know that we're seeing that connection happening in our city, and an interesting kind of phenomenon in a region like ours, where there actually are those types of impacts, heat-related mortality, hospitalizations, even in the winter months. I've been talking to our fire department and our public safety offices and teams about fire season, for example. And they basically say, Lauren, there is no fire season anymore. Fire season is all year long. And it's actually quite difficult to to prepare and plan, especially when you think about the relationships between public safety programs across the state, where the state comes and helps, different regions if they're having a large wildfire, or will send people over to Northern California. Northern California will come down to Southern California to help with a wildfire. But if we are all fighting fires on all fronts, then how do we cope with that resource strain? Where do the drop helicopters go when there's 4 different fires across the state to go to? These are really difficult things to plan for in the face of extreme climate change and all of the different things that come together when you look at extreme heat, whether that's drought conditions and how you respond there. Getting a little bit on a wider climate tangent, which I'm known to do, but back to our localized extreme heat here, we see that we have to work on this issue. It's an imperative because it is indeed a public health issue. So what do our cooling strategies look like? In the most basic terms, we have a 3-legged stool of solutions that continue to innovate. But overall, we need to look at how we reflect heat away from our neighborhoods and shade our neighborhoods from the sun in order to provide more, depending on what we need to do, healthy routes to and from transit stops, or around walking and biking routes, or in our neighborhoods, dense neighborhoods themselves, in and around parks and recreation centers. We have to look at a neighborhood by neighborhood scale, what is the solution that we're trying to achieve? Is it that we're seeing there's a mobility issue because of the heat exposure along a route that is keeping people from getting on a bike, walking to the transit stop, or if you have no choice but to do that, and then you're exposed to extreme heat? Is it more of an equity issue in someone's home where they live in a neighborhood without a lot of shade, without a lot of ability to protect yourself from the hot sun, and so they have an overburdened pocketbook from excess air conditioning needs in their home because they're not protected, they don't have the efficient homes, they don't have access to trees and shading structures, and so then you have more low-income residents who then have to spend even more on air conditioning if they even have it in their homes. So we have to look at a neighborhood by neighborhood, community by community scale, what are the solutions that we're trying to achieve to understand what types of strategies we want to deploy. It's not a one size fits all. So we have to understand those patterns across our city. So taking one by one, cool roofs. Essentially, basic concept is that the material that you use on a roof can reflect the sunlight and basically keep the roof from absorbing that heat, which then would both have an issue with the need for air conditioning within that home or building itself, but also when it absorbs that heat, it radiates out to the community. And so dealing with both of those issues when you deal with cool roofs. And because of the issue around our buildings themselves, Title 24, our Green Building Code in the state, actually contemplates that installing cool roofs could be a way to also meet energy efficiency goals. And so some people have already been using cool roofs in buildings in order to comply with energy efficiency requirements, because it does help your energy load in a building if you don't have to use more air conditioning if you have a cool roof. However, we took it one step further in the city, and with an amazing collaboration across city departments, across nonprofit partners like Climate Resolve that's here in the room, working with the industry, with technology providers, solution providers for the materials on our roofs, working with the utilities to provide incentives for people to retrofit their roofs. We passed an ordinance that came into effect in 2015 that requires in Los Angeles that all new residential roofs must be a cool roof, and that all new additions on homes also must be a cool roof. But we did that in a way that at the same time we're providing the incentives, so we're addressing those impacts and working directly with the industry to ensure that the market is coming along with us to provide those solutions and those costs continuing to come down. Since then, we actually have already installed 27,000 cool roofs across the city. That's 55.6 million square feet of cool roof in the city. LADWP has distributed $1.8 million in incentives for cool roofs across the city since 2014. And we've seen a really exciting uptake in the program, so much so that we are updating our ordinance and we're going to expand the program. We've seen success so much so that the county has been working with us to adopt the rule as well. So we will be expanding the ordinance to apply to all buildings across the city and to increase the strength of the cooling characteristics of our cool roofs. And so it's really exciting to see that when you start to put a policy in place, just a few years later, you can continue to strengthen and to know that we will always do that. We will always review our policies and we always see where we can go further and be more ambitious. Cool pavement. Now, you saw that slide where it showed all the different issues I work on across environment, economy, and equity. There is probably no topic that I get more media requests to talk about than the Cool Pavement program in Los Angeles. It's really incredible. It's really exciting. In the Sustainable City Plan, we said that we wanted to pilot a cool slurry, working with our Bureau of Street Services that's really a forward-thinking department in this city. Working with them, they wanted to find a cool slurry that we could use to pave our roads in a much cooler, more efficient way that doesn't absorb that heat in the same way that our current asphalt does. And what we found actually is that a cool slurry didn't really exist. The technology wasn't there. So we started working with a company that has a coating, a cool coating. And I mentioned earlier on in my presentation that the mayor mandated that all the city departments appoint departmental CSOs, Chief Sustainability Officers. And since that network began in 2015, we meet monthly. We've never missed a meeting since I've been here. We've never missed a monthly meeting. And this is where you get the Bureau of Street Services together with the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, with the Department of Transportation, with the Bureau of Sanitation, with the libraries, the zoos, every department you could think of coming together and talking about creative solutions or sharing with each other the solutions that they're deploying on sustainability. And so one of the first meetings in those early months, our Chief Sustainability Officer for the Bureau of Street Services got up and said, so I've got a problem. I need to pilot this cool pavement idea. It's something we've been kicking around for a while. I can't do it on road because we have to test it off road. We have to make sure it's safe for vehicles before we, deploy it on road. Makes total sense. But I don't know where to go. I need a hot surface. I need a big open surface. I need to be able to test it against the alternative. Does anyone have any ideas? Does anyone know where to go? And our Chief Sustainability Officer for the Recreation and Parks Department got up and said, the Balboa Sports Complex, super hot there, right? San Fernando Valley. Big open parking lot, very dark surface, sun beating directly down. We're kind of thinking we might want to do some maintenance on that parking lot now. Why don't you come try it on our parking lot? That is the type of collaboration that never would have happened if the mayor hadn't said, we need to all get together and we need to talk, and we need to be talking about solutions on sustainability. So we went ahead and we did that. And that pilot got started in 2015 between Rec and Parks and Bureau of Street Services and our General Services Department to test a patch of cool pavement against the non-serviced part of the parking lot. And we went ahead and we did this, and it was a really exciting result because what we saw was that there was a 10-degree difference between the cool pavement, paved, coated asphalt versus the untreated asphalt. I mean, you literally saw dogs walking across the asphalt and choosing to walk on the cool pavement because it hurt their paws otherwise. And it allowed us to do the vehicle tests, the skid tests, the reflectivity tests, to really look and make sure that it was safe for on-road deployment. And this got us all really excited. It got City Council really excited. And so City Council approved pilots in every one of the 15 City Council districts. And this was very cool. It became a community event every time we did the coatings in a small residential neighborhood area. Whatever we thought we could test different uses, different areas. People would come out, they became neighborhood events, people were really excited. Like I said, a lot of media coverage, incredible interest in, wow, this has never been done before. Are the cities that we work with wanting to learn about that as well? So we've now paved or coated 150,000 square feet of streets, and really excited that there's so much success around the program that we're committing to 250 lane miles of cool pavement over the next 10 years. And we're really excited to see not just the use of the technology that we have now, but we're already testing new innovations. And our Bureau of Street Services, they are all about it. This is a really fun post from our departmental CSO from the Bureau of Street Services, who would go around and show, like, look, this is really working. And you'll hear him on the radio, you'll hear him online, you'll read about him in the paper. I mean, he is an international spokesperson on Cool Pavement at this point. So follow Greg if you want to keep track of the Cool Pavement program in Los Angeles. On to tree canopy. There's so many reasons to be focusing on a healthy tree population, a healthy urban forest for the city. If you think about the shading benefits, the cooling benefits, the air quality benefits, the stormwater capture opportunities, the biodiversity enhancements that come from a healthy tree population. So our street trees we know that actually trees really across the city are in relatively poor condition. We know that there have been a lot of stress from drought, from pests. We've faced funding cuts during the recession in terms of maintenance. So, we have a policy now that for every tree that we lose, every tree that we have to take away, we have to plant 2 more. And it's really important to think about, where should we be planting those trees that have the most benefit? What kind of trees should we be planting to have the most benefit? Drought tolerant, native, biodiversity enhancing. What we have to think very strategically, and not just kind of a 1-for-2 replacement. We really want to be strategic about these investments. And so we've increased resources for our urban forests. We are augmenting crews for maintenance, for watering. We've created some training programs, some landscaping and better pruning practices training. So we're creating a green workforce. We're doing green workforce training just to maintain a healthy and grow a healthy urban forest population. That includes hiring an urban forestry administrator to oversee policies, to recommend policy changes. We've committed to planting nearly 100,000 trees over the next 3 years. And we know that we need to focus on areas that need it the most. We're going to pilot, as I mentioned, cool neighborhoods. We've looked at, on a broad scale, what the average canopy cover is across all the city council districts. And we have said that our most needy districts, we will, over the next 3 years, increase their canopy cover, raise their average by 50% across those districts. So we're really excited to begin that work, to update our urban forestry management plan and really see those changes. That includes needing to have a robust tree inventory that doesn't actually exist. So we don't have a full, clear view of everything we have across the city, of all the trees, not just our street trees, but in our parks. And actually, the vast majority of our trees are privately owned, privately managed trees. And so we have to think about how we engage with residents across the city to maintain a healthy tree population. So just, we've, as part of that, early on in the administration, we created a program called City Plants. And if you have been to any community events in the city of Los Angeles, hopefully you've seen City Plants there. You can take home a free tree or two. And they look at the benefits of native species, of shade opportunities. They help talk to you about where in your home, in your yard, should you be planting these trees to get the most benefit. Since the mayor took office, we've planted 120,000 trees. City Plants has helped us get millions of dollars in grant funding from different programs, including from the climate policies of the state. Millions of dollars in programs to plant tens of thousands of trees that City Plants has helped us plant. And that's a leadership that we continue to try to maintain and to grow. And I wanted to end with just, not sure where I am in timing, but I wanted to end with an example that actually George asked me to bring up today. And it's an exciting pilot program that's just getting started, an example of these cool neighborhoods that we're trying to pilot, which is the Canoga Park Sherman Way Metro Station cooling project. And again, the innovation of our Bureau of Street Services, thinking ahead about how do we start thinking about cool neighborhoods in different types of needs, particularly in vulnerable communities. And so they were able to get a grant from the state, from the adaptation planning grants of the Department of Transportation at the state level. And that's a $400,000 grant. And the state's paying for most of that, about $350,000, and we're putting in the rest. And it's allowing us to go into an area, if you think about, so highest heat vulnerability areas of the city, that's Canoga Park. That's the area, the radius of the project. So you can see the degree of vulnerability around a very high trafficked transit, active transportation area that we want to make sure people are using, biking, walking to transit stations, the first mile, last mile needs of this community, that they are able to do so safely. And so we want to be able to test different effective strategies for this neighborhood. So a little snapshot of what the bus rapid transit line area is going to look like, but no surprise, it's going to help us deploy all of the strategies that we've been talking about, but do so in a way where we can really track results, and do so in a way that we're developing it out that's community-oriented, community-informed, starting to plan workshops to really get a sense of the needs and a sense of the interests of the community as we put this project together. And so, with that, I think maybe I have a couple of minutes for a few questions.
3 quick questions. So, how can I get a copy of that PowerPoint? How can I access your sustainability plan and then the new one coming up in 3 weeks? What's the name of that group that you said is all the cities are working together?
Okay, so the access to the PowerPoint, the League of Women Voters has the PowerPoint and they are free to distribute it. That's totally fine. So if you're on their list, you should be able to get it. How can you access the Sustainable City Plan? Our first bullet here, plan.lamayor.org, it will have our plan and all of our annual reports. Every year we put out a report on our progress, so you can access all of those there. And your third question was, I'm sorry?
You said there's a group of cities that are working on this together. What's the name of that group?
So Climate Mayors is the group of cities that the mayor has worked with to uphold the Paris Climate Agreement. That's climatemayors.org. And also there's C40, thank you. C40 is a group of international megacities, 94 cities. The mayor is the vice chair of C40. And they actually it's a great point, they've got a number of international networks on a number of issues, including cooling.
Great,
thank you.
This is sort of a process question.
Sure.
I'm on your website.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, third annual report, and you're starting right out with the GHG emissions. This comes from, I presume, the climate action plan that your city did, I guess. And so now you have to report the GHGs.
That's right.
This whole process, LA plan, I presume, is about reporting back based upon your climate action plan. Is that correct?
Yes.
With all these policies.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is now part of your general plan, right?
So the general plan is currently undergoing an update process. It's a 4-year process.
Right.
So they've taken a bit of a pause because they've come to us and said, we need to reorient the plan towards sustainability. And so we've been working together, and actually one of the things we've done is we've engaged our sustainability stakeholders. We've said, participate in the general plan process. As the general plan folks, because there's a lot of different stakeholders who go to the planning commission who don't necessarily know about the sustainability works, and vice versa. So we've been trying to cross-pollinate stakeholders so we can inform both plans at the same time.
So when does the formal adoption of the general plan?
That process has just begun. So that's a 4-year plan process. But just to say what she's looking at is that on our website, on plan.lamayor.org, we do report our greenhouse gas emissions on an annual basis. It's up to 2016 right now. We will be adding 2017 shortly. And so that's really exciting that we do publicly report that information. In the 2019 Sustainable City Plan that's coming out, we will also chart out our greenhouse gas emission reduction pathways to carbon neutral, and you'll see all that as well.
Yeah, that's what you have on here.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Hello. My first question is about, you talked about the urban heat islands and so how our buildings or pavement absorb that heat, but then you talked about when we reflect it, it still radiates outward, so I'm confused about which
That's
is
a great-
better. And the second question is, when you talk about the cool coatings for pavement, but then what about the idea of permeable pavements to capture the rainwater?
Two very apropos questions. So the first question about the reflectivity of heat, of UV rays, essentially. So I'm going to try to test my science here, but when heat gets absorbed by hot surfaces and then it gets re-radiated back, it turns into a different UV ray. I don't remember if it's the ABB or UVA, BC. Short to long. It's short. So the difference is when it's reflected back out, it is not felt by us as heat. That goes back out into the atmosphere. When it is absorbed back out and then re-radiated as infrared heat, I think that's right, that is the heat that's felt by us. So it comes into a different short versus long wave heat. That's what's able to go right back out into the atmosphere away from us versus what's the heat that we actually physically feel.
The waviness that you see is your eye barely picking up the infrared coming off.
The heat, physical
You see a
heat.
hot surface that looks kind of wavy, that's that radiation.
That's its interaction with the atmosphere. Your other question, so the balance between the use of cool pavement surface coatings and permeable pavement, perfect question. And it is indeed a balance. And so we do look at where should we be deploying which type of solution, particularly where we can have the most stormwater capture impact is where we would prioritize permeable pavement, and where we need to have the most urban heat impact is where we would prioritize cool pavement surface coatings. But it's totally the right question. It is something that we take into account in those decisions.
Hi, thanks. Real simple question. What's the wear and tear on the coating for cool pavements? Is that even known?
That is part of the pilots. That's why we're in 2.4 lane miles currently versus a full rollout, because we have to really understand it over time. The on-road testing across the council districts has just begun. We've seen that perhaps less about the wear and tear and more about how quickly the coatings, frankly, get dirty, right? And so understanding the relative reflectivity impact over time there, which is why at the same time, our Bureau of Street Services has been able to start looking at an actual slurry, which gets at some of that wear and tear issue. So this is absolutely a pilot. The wear and tear has been quite encouraging thus far, and we're trying to balance the coating quality there versus moving into more of a slurry where it's really based in the physical pavement itself. Come on closer.
I'm Gloria Gutierrez from League of Women Torrance area, and I have two questions for you.
Yes.
One question is about the incentive program you mentioned for growing trees. I wonder what sort of incentivizing you've had so far thought of for how to get private citizens to grow trees so they could eventually be planted, and whether community gardens and schools have been considered. I know several community gardens actually ban growing trees. So what's your answer to that?
Very important questions. So we've been thinking through a lot of different ways to try to incent the growth of trees and the maintenance of trees, which is really kind of the bigger issue, is more the healthy maintenance of our tree population. City plants, as I said, you can get up to 7 trees a year from city plants for free. And so we very much encourage that. And we help you along the way. We also are thinking about deploying, and I don't want to steal the Bureau of Street Services thunder here, but creating an Adopt a Tree program where citizens, blocks, businesses would actually take on that role and responsibility and take some pride and ownership as a community into an Adopt a Tree program. Absolutely, the working in schools. We have 2 really exciting programs called the Transformative Climate, or 2 really exciting projects within the Transformative Climate Communities program, which is a program that was begun by the state through the California Climate Investment Funds, that we have now a project in Watts and in Pacoima Sun Valley, 2 areas that are very highly disadvantaged, low-income neighborhoods, blighted, very vulnerable to things like extreme heat. And part of the solutions that we're deploying are urban gardens, urban agriculture, and tree planting, particularly street trees, but including schools as well.
Second question and last one.
Oh, I thought that was a second question.
So second question has to do with the slurry. I noticed that it seemed like it was a this or that. We went with what we have versus this one option for a pretty bright white. And I had some friends mentioning concerns about road blindness. I was wondering if they piloted any other colors and to see if there was any significant difference.
Yeah. So the end result of once the coating actually dries, it is not white. The mayor made a joke. So if you look at it here, like it's not white. I mean, if you look at the sidewalk, you can see that you're used to quite a substantial color differential between the sidewalk and a road. So it is actually still quite light, but it's not white. It dries a gray. So the mayor, I remember him joking, paint the streets gray. Not a great slogan. We've got to think of something else. But that is essentially what it ends up doing. And like we said, before we put this on road, we tested the reflectivity impacts and all of those things. But continuing to test the role of different shadings, and again, not just a coating, but actually trying to get it into the slurry mixture itself.
Hi, John Orville, Pasadena. Thank you, and congratulations on the really encouraging work you're underway. And I'm hoping that some of our cities can benefit from it too. My question is about what I believe is also true, that the LA Department of Water and Power is pressing ahead with constructing a new huge natural gas-fired electricity plant in Utah, which will continue to emit carbon pollution into the 2070s. This will worsen the extreme heat in LA. The city of Pasadena last year studied this project and concluded that it's not going to be the lowest cost way to get electricity for Pasadena, and opted out of the project. And I'm just baffled why Mayor Garcetti has not stopped this project. Can you help us understand?
Absolutely, completely good question. So the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power has dramatically cut its greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, it has met the state mandate 12 years ahead of time for its greenhouse gas emission reductions. So leading, thank you. But you're absolutely right. We still have a long way to go to be zero carbon. There's no question about that. We have committed, we will be completely divested from coal by 2025, 2 years earlier than state mandated, and that we actually are legally required to. And where our coal assets currently reside are indeed in Utah. And so what's happened is a recent decision that we were contracted, this would have been at least 5 years ago, contracted to transform that coal plant into a natural gas plant. And this is contracted by a number of actors across the state. in both California and in Utah. What we recently voted on was to dramatically cut the size of that plant, a plant that was getting built with or without us, dramatically cut the size of that plant. And the reason we did that was twofold. One, we said, we know a lot more. We don't need this, A. And B, what we do need is access to the assets, because both on site, on location there, as well as by staying invested in this project, we have asset ownership over two potential areas. There is options for compressed air energy storage on site, which would allow us to inject air into what otherwise would be a cavern and be able to use air as a battery to deploy to help us turn a generation turbine powered by air. That's one thing. Second thing is that the transmission lines that we have access to through this continued investment would provide more than double and potentially more than triple the amount of renewable energy coming into the city that we would not be able to access if we didn't maintain investment in this particular project right now. But what we have said in continuing there is that, one, we will dramatically cut the size of the project. Two, we will phase it out faster than originally planned. And three, we will not repower the natural gas power plants that were scheduled to be repowered inside the city of Los Angeles. So in doing so, we have cut, and the mayor committed to just a couple of weeks ago, cutting the in-basin natural gas generation by 2029 by 38% in 2029 alone. And so that will leave us, thank you, by 2025, we will be 55, by 2025, we'll be 55% renewable energy. And during that decision around the Utah project that we are already committed to legally 5 years ago, we agreed to up our renewable energy target. In the plan, in 2014, 2015, the plan was 50% by 2030. That was the ambitious, yet to be passed state law. Since then, we moved it to 65% by 2036, just a year and a half later. And then we agreed to 70% renewable energy by 2036. And this is different because this is generation that we build, we own, we maintain. We are our own balancing authority, which is different from the rest of the state. So we are literally building a brand new, completely renewable system on our way to 100%. Just to stop for one more minute is that we are the first city to invest in a system-wide project with the Department of Energy, a $10 million project to chart our path to renewable energy, to understand that we have just made major commitments to cut 38% of our gas that last year wasn't even contemplated, that 3 weeks ago wasn't contemplated, and that we need to accelerate our transition to renewable energy inside and outside of the basin. So we're working with the best minds in, I would venture to say, the world to do that, which is different than the ability to buy power from a utility and buy that those renewable credits. We have to show how we build it, how we send it around the city, inside and out, on our own. So I think we are absolutely still leading. I understand that that was a controversial decision from the outside, but I would say that we did a heck of a lot to actually think ahead about what our long-term investments are to ensure that we can meet our renewable goals. But thank you for the question. Oh, I'm
We
losing
only
this.
have 1 more minute left, so only one of you can. Can you click closer?
I will stay here.
I'll talk fast. Okay, so I get frustrated. I go to a lot of these symposiums and they talk about homeowners, homeowners, homeowners. It was my understanding that 57 to 60% of the people in LA live in apartments or rent. So we constantly get short-shifted about, situations. I live downtown where there's tons and tons of old buildings and they can't even you can't even have an air conditioner because they're like, I used to live in one that was built in 1913. You couldn't even have an air conditioner. It was miserable at night. A fan does not do it. So I wish the city could kind of mandate something for retrofitting these old buildings. There's thousands of people living downtown in substandard housing, and it's miserably hot down there. They're living on the sidewalks, or you're living in a little tiny room with just a fan, and it won't cut it.
That's absolutely right. This is why this is a huge equity issue. I mean, LA is a renter city. It absolutely is. And so when we think about, now the mandates around cool roofs are residential, so that includes multifamily. When we also look at how we're directing our energy efficiency retrofits, our energy efficiency incentives and rebates that we're providing, we are directing them, orienting them toward multifamily and renters and low-income households. So we know that even over the next 3 years alone, we'll be spending $100 million specifically in low-income and rental housing for energy efficiency to help people stay cool and keep their bills down. We're very, very understanding and focused on the fact that there is a major equity issue there, which is why we're looking at what are the communities that need it most to deploy these cooling strategies as well as energy saving strategies. That includes new programs, I should say, also for solar. Right now, it is very much an issue of local solar being more accessible to single-family homeowners, and we want to make sure that renters and multifamily dwellers are able to access solar as well. So we've created new community solar programs that are rolling out this year in 2019, as well as virtual net metering to help people who are not in a single family home be able to do the same types of things that single family homeowners are able to do. Thank you so much.